I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Derek Simmross. I am the CEO and co-founder of ODI Pharma. And together with me here today is Volker Wiederich, who is the chairman and also co-founder. We first, before we start, would like to thank Sedermera for organizing the Sedermeradagen to give us a chance to meet all of you and explain the opportunity moving forward within our interesting field of business. And over the course of the next 20 minutes, our goals are to explain to you who we are, what we're doing, how we arrived at our business model, what our business model is, and why we are here to raise capital. And so if I get started here, I have to use the PowerPoint. I'm a little bit old school, so I need my slides. What is ODI Pharma? ODI Pharma, yes, we're in the medical cannabis business, but we are a pure pharmaceutical company. We are specialized under all regulatory fields of business, and our goal and our targets and our beliefs that we have the right infrastructure to do it is to become the leading provider of medical cannabis products throughout Europe. Basically, I've been involved in the industry within medical cannabis 100% since 2016. And I'll explain to you a little bit later in the presentation how we got there. My first exposure to the industry was in 2012, which a private equity firm that I was working for at the time actually created something that IPO'd last year very successfully in the United States. And so I followed the development of the industry basically since its inception. As you look in Canada, it's a 13-year-old business. A 6-year-old business starting in 2013, and in the United States it's similar, and in Europe it's a 2-year-old business. And so everybody in the industry is basically trying to understand what is the best framework to go forward, and we think our business model is quite attractive and unique. In order to build this business, we understood that we needed some professional guidance on the research side. And we also joined forces. We've been discussing with him for 2 years now, and he has now joined our team officially. A research medical physician that has been working with the Swiss government in alternative medicines and been published in medical cannabis effects on the on the human system for the last 20 years. And he's a very welcome addition to the team, and he'll be helping with our educational programs as well going forward, which we think is a critical part of the business as the way we see it. Now, where are we starting? Why are we starting this way? It's an important question. Why did we choose Poland? Why is that the first point of business for us? Now, I think that we have under the three bullet points there. I'll start with the bottom one first, and that is to understand the industry as it's being created right now is very sporadic, which we'll talk about it later. Each country has its own set of regulations and laws, and Poland is developed under a system where it's very flexible, that basically any patient can receive it for a variety of symptoms. Some doctor may feel it's okay for migraine headaches, some for just cancer research, some for MS, some for different diseases whatsoever. And it's important to understand in this point that for our purposes, we believe that medical cannabis, not so much as a cure, but a symptom, it relieves the symptoms of sicknesses. And so when you look at Poland, the first thing that made it attractive to us is that the legal framework that was set up in the country is actually the most flexible in Europe. And that gives the product a much wider spectrum where we can actually sell the business. It's also a substantial size. If you take a look at it geographically, Poland is the size of Canada, approximately. They have basically a $72 billion euro a year medical industry, which is quite large. They spend 14 billion euros a year on pharmaceutical products, and it's estimated that the market size for the medical cannabis, based on the numbers presented by the Polish authorities, that they're expecting 300,000 patients are in immediate need for medical cannabis in the country as of to date. And we see that as relating to a 2 billion euro market business just in Poland alone. And so, who is our target group? As we stated, basically in the Poland, our first country of business, it's everyone. We think that over a given lifetime, everybody will come across some illness where they will have the opportunity to benefit off of the product. In order to incorporate our strategy, basically we needed to go and spend a lot of time to understand who the partners are, both in Canada and in Poland. So we have been on the road basically between 2016 and 2018 nonstop. In Canada, we've been to most of the site facilities, most of the producers, when they were still approachable. As we came in the early part of the industry, where most people didn't really understand the value of what was going on, and so we had open welcome arms, and we helped in some capital raises going forward. But we found that the best relationship that we built for our business going forward, as they're a technologically advanced producer, and they also received us well, and we've looked forward to building some business together with them in Europe. So Afria is our cultivation partner, and in Poland, we spent 1.5 to 2 years negotiating the contract, as most people we understood were going directly into Germany when legalization came into the European market. And we understand that there's a lot of money going in there, but they're ignoring the residual countries. So we built and spent our time understanding the legal framework in the other countries besides Germany, even though we have done work in Germany as well. And we can go into that in a little bit more in the future. Our product, which we expect and why we're here today, and we'll explain why we are looking for capital at the given moment, towards the end of the presentation, is that we are expecting to be launched on the market in 2020, which we will be. Right now there's only one product on the market, and we think that we're very early in it, and we're able to establish our targets and objectives, which we'll explain shortly. Now I'm going to go over the slide a little bit quickly, just as I see time is, I thought it would go fast, but it's slow, but it's going quite fast. The cannabis market, as we see it, we just, for the first presentation when we were looking at how big is Canada, how big is the European market, we understood the population of Europe, we understood how many patients are already in countries where there is access to medical cannabis, and it's evolving quickly. Like just as a month ago, France approved a research program for 3,000 patients, and they're doing funding for it. So right now, I think it's to date that there's some form of a program in Europe in 17 countries, and so it's much more than 200 million at the moment. But there's a very big definition of what it means to be legal medical cannabis. In some countries, it may be just for epilepsy. In some countries, it may be as a medicine of last resort. And that's one of the other reasons that we repeat for why Poland is an interesting market for us. But if you want to know why, I mean, 58 billion makes sense. We took the number from Prohibition Partners, who did some research, and we tried to figure out how did they come up with 58 billion. And we just actually backed it down. If you take a daily patient, from Health Canada, it's 1.6 grams per day for an average medical patient getting medical cannabis. That, divided by the amount of days, and then you take it out, it comes out to exactly 1% of the population in Europe. That's what a 58 billion euro market share represents. So if you think about the Canadian market, it started at 2 years, 0.5%. 4 years, it was 1%, and now it's much higher. But then, of course, they went recreational, which changed things and is not our business model. We're purely medical. And as we reinforce on this slide as well, is that Poland is, 300,000 patients is what we're targeting, but we do have much higher expectations. If we just do 1% in the general line, then it is 380,000, which is a big difference when it comes to the bottom line. In order to get the proper structure into place, we had a business model that was created with ODI Pharma Schweiz. ODI Pharma Schweiz we created in early 2018 after a lot of market research and study of when we did it. We created February 2018. And there's one word missing here, it's strategic research and education. As education is a very core, important building block of what we built our business strategy on and how we're going to implement and how demand is created for the product, because that is a big vacuum of, okay, medical cannabis is available, but how do doctors know how to prescribe it? And so it's an interesting aspect of the business. Then we started directly under ODI Pharma in April the same year. We started the Polish strategy as we knew we were making very good headway in Poland. We had good relationships and we knew it was just a matter of time before the contract was signed. But it still took another 7 months after that to get all the details worked out, which was interesting, but a lot of work, but it's in place and we're quite excited. And then when we needed to the point now where we have to start ordering the raw material, which is basically what we do, and we'll go over it in the next slide, is that we're ordering the raw material, but then we need to be packaging the product, we need to do logistics, import, and all of the different structures in there. We needed the financial raise, and that's why we started the financial hub. We knew Sedermera had experience in the industry. We met Sedermera. There was a very, very good meeting. They understood the business model directly. And since then, we've been very happy to work with them. It's been interesting, but the requirement was that we had a Scandinavian mother company, as it's a Scandinavian listing that we're going to be doing, and they want to make sure that it's under the controls of the Scandinavian K3 auditing principles, and so we do have PwC as our auditor for the mothership. This slide here tries to tell, it's really hard in a nutshell to tell, and we didn't write all of the words down, which I'm going to use, but if you look at it, Damien, the first 2 years, we're building the infrastructure, basically the supply agreement, the sales agreement, and also building the infrastructure of import and how do you store the product, where you need to keep it at a certain room temperature, you need to have the pharmacology, basically. You have to follow the product from the second it enters the country until the second the patient consumes it, and any byproducts thereafter. You have to document that with the regulatory authorities. Product development, I mean, how is it to be packaged? How is it to be sent off? These are all things that we've gone through and worked through the process over the last 2 years. And on top of it, we have the financial aspect, which is interesting. We have testing after when the product comes to the country before it's released, it has to be tested. We have to organize that. We have operational, which is actually getting all the right people in the teams that are a qualified person in the right place that has the ability to sign off on the product. And I think that education is the framework of what we are working on, and that's one of the most important aspects of our business. But the reality is that from getting the raw material in the country, we have responsibility, and we have maybe 20, 30, 40 different steps in between to make sure that it comes safely to the patient and that the patient actually receives a high quality product, and if there's a problem that we know how to deal with the structure afterwards. And so I think that if you look at the industry in general, in the cannabis industry, we break it down into there's 2 aspects. There's cultivation, which is a monumental task. It's not our business. Our business is implementation. What we have done is built up the knowledge of how the regulatory frameworks work in the different countries. We've also learned what is the right ways to package and have proprietary. We have research program which is going on about the correct dosaging of what is the safe amount of dosaging. So it's in our interest to know what is too much, what is not too much. So each industry, each sector of the product, I mean, if someone has an issue with cancer or an oncology doctor, they need to know how to actually prescribe the product correctly, so it doesn't mix up with medicines, it doesn't have any bad side effects, and that's part of the project that we're going on, and we're able to do it in quite an efficient pricing scheme, and we're quite excited about that, and we'll have more updates on that in the future. If I switch to the next slide, this is a little bit of repetition from what I've said here today, so I'll just keep it short. In 2016, going back, that I knew that the industry was there, and it was quite exciting. And I saw the development from many of my near and dear that had been invested in earlier companies than I became a believer. We had to go and educate ourselves. We had to build the network. We went to Canada, as we mentioned. We had to meet all of the right players, which we did early. And then the groundwork in Europe has been enormous, speaking with the distributors, speaking with the regulatory bodies and getting the right framework. And so we wanted to show this a project graph of where we are and what we have to do next. And all of the sections in here, regulatory framework, importer, GMP, and all of these are in place. They're all there. We're just soon submitting the documentation, and then we expect to be live in mid-next year. The process is between 4 and 7 months of the MAH application. We have the strongest distributor, the #1 distributor in the country, with a 30% market share. They have a 60% approval rating as the most important pharmaceutical distributor in the country. And so it's just a matter of plug and play. So the yellows will turn green with just a very short period where it's exciting. And so if we take a look at our financial objectives. Our financial objectives, I'll be quite short here as we're running low on time. We're expecting a 10% market share. And I say expect, I mean, basically at the moment, since we'll be one of the few on the market in our timeline, that we think that 10% is very conservative. We also think our partner and the way we're structured and our relationship with our partner, which we can't discuss too much as it's a commercial term, is quite it's quite a not just realistic, it's quite a conservative estimate of what we think our market share can be. That market share basically will give us year one 3 million euros, which I'll give you at the end of the presentation on the slide how we calculate that number. And our operating expenses is the #1 focus of our company. Is we want cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. Basically, we're not taking salaries out of the company. We're building it. We're keeping the money in the company. We may in the future take salaries once there's cash flow, but the reason of the capital raise is pure business. It's not to build a facility that's dangerous. It's not to buy a distribution storage hub. It's pure business trade finance, which we'll talk about in a bit. The next chart is more of a comic relief chart, just so don't have high expectations that there's something of high value out of here. We just basically felt, how do we describe that every country in Europe is completely different? And so we just made a structured chaos. You basically have Canada on the sides, the producers, you have Austria, and we just put a few of the countries in Europe here. But what's interesting is that the legal means of the product and the strategy for each country is going to be different. It is always going to be left down to the country in Europe how they decide to implement medical cannabis. It's in the United States even broken down into states, but we don't have anything to do with the United States, as you know, besides my passport. I have a Swedish as well. But basically within this structure here, some countries may require cultivation, and that will make it harder to get the access to the licenses to sell the product. They're limiting it. So what is the strategy for that market? It's coming in with a more second-order product, a new mechanism of intake that is going to be very competitive and very interesting, and something that's adding new value to it. In some countries, it may be just oils. What is the strategy for that? And what does the distributor want to have? Some countries, we may want a small distributor that we're working with. Some countries, we have a large. And so the strategy is going to vary between country to country, and that is, the EU regulation has been working for 2 years already to try to implement a harmonized policy, and we think it's still 3 to 4 years away from being harmonized. And even after that, there will be country-specific regulations. Who we are. With 4 minutes, I haven't got to the issue. Basically, my background, which maybe we should have started with this, and Volker Wiederich, who the founder, together with me. We are investment banking background, trading. I spent 10 years in the Swedish banks. I was head of foreign exchange for Sweden, for Nordea. Spent the time after that on the buy side, investing and analyzing companies. And Volker has equal equivalents, mainly in the real estate sector, building businesses and studying investment scenarios in industries from gaming, from natural resources to. So we've studied a lot of different industries. We've studied how companies have succeed and grow, and where they spend money and what their business strategy on waste and what's a risky investment and what's not a risky investment. And the core behind our structure is focus on cash flow, focus on getting something to the product, focus on keeping the costs low, and that is how we are always going to build our business model going forward. If there's a strategic investment, we need to know the cash flow payout and we need to know the timing. When we look at it, I mean, we've invested a total of 8 million kronor into the company. We are going to be investing more into the IPO, which I'll get to in just a little bit here, which I forgot the most important people. Sorry. We have Karina Kalinsky, who is she is the magician for our Polish successes. She has implemented the relationships with NUCAB, and as you know, it's quite an advantage in some countries or every country to speak the local language. She is a Polish citizen, and she's incremental in working with the health agencies, and she's incremental in working with the application process and the partnerships. And we have Gösta Ledén, who is a professional independent director, which it's a requirement in the Spotlight to have a third director. We also use his firm to do our corporate accounting in Sweden, and also corporate secretarial. So we have basically full clarity. Shoot. And Marcus Fritschet, who is the key to our educational and research programs, and we will have more information on our research program in the very near future. As I'm running out of time here, summary for the offering. Okay, the value of how we created our company, the subscription period. If I go through the offering, which the information's up here, there's 300,000 patients in Poland today. We're assuming it's going to take 5 years to get there. So they're not going to be 300,000 patients right away. Our calculations for our valuation are based, it's going to be a slow progressive increase, which we think it'll be faster, so we're conservative. We're basing it on a 10% market share, which is very conservative. We're basing it on patients get 0.6 grams per day. And Health Canada website suggests and recommends that the average is 1.6 grams per day. So we're taking a large haircut on the potential patient size. Using these in just a straight line calculation, we are trading at, on our valuation in year 1, 5 times EBITDA. For those of you that understand, please ask me afterwards. And after 2 years of business, we're trading at 1.5 times EBITDA, which is a very fair price for an IPO for this business. And we think that it should be exciting for you. On top of that, Volker and I are investing another 1.2 million kronor into the company, into the IPO after our initial investment. We're also locking ourselves up into the company for 18 months with a 90% lockup. And we were very well received in the pre-subscription. We filled up, so we basically had to stop it at 70% pre-subscribed after just a few days. And I think that I'm very thankful for the trust, and I think that we were quite happy with the way it worked together with Sedermera, and we believe that people believe. But then the most important, or one important part, is to understand how we are actually moving forward. I'm out of time. 75% of the capital raise is based on order flow only. 25% is based on hiring additional staff, which the market we're in, it's actually quite a reasonable allocation we think we have. We have the expansion program as we're going into other countries very quickly. We can't announce too much what, but it's our vision to be all over Europe, and we have our strategies in place for them. Our educational program, it takes some time. We're ready for that, we think in January, we hope. And we are going to plan on splitting it equally in between that. So the use of capital is meant for capital generation, not for costs. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry I took too much time.
No, not a problem. You will be back, but not today. But once the subscription period opens up, we will invite for another luncheon here in Stockholm. So you will have the opportunity to meet with Derek again and to hear a little bit more in depth about the company. And you will also have the opportunity to take questions at that time.
Great.
Okay. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.